first time I met anybody who became involved in welfare state was in 1968 in a show in the Roundhouse in London. The hero rises up, and I met Boris Howarth. And it seems I also met Maggie Howarth, his wife, at the same time. She told me later.
Is that because you didn't know who she was? Or
I
you
think
just didn't remember?
that the show was so chaotic and amazing. I was at drama school at East 15 at the time. And we'd been bussed in to do lighting and sound and stage management on this big show run by the ICA at Camden Town. Chalk Farm, sorry. And so moved on a bit, got to, eventually I got a job in theatre. I became general manager of the Chester Gateway Theatre, 1970, 74. When I decided to move from there, and I'd heard about one or two things happening, odd things happening, because I was very middle of the road theatre at the time. I got a job in Cumbria for a company called Renaissance Theatre Trust in Ulverston. It was a promoter and promoting events around Cumbria. And one of the board members said, Rory McNeil, his name, said, I think you ought to come down and spend some time with us and meet this company. So I got taken to the Tip in Burnley and met Welfare State, who were working away there and doing processional work in East Lancashire. So I followed them around on that, was excited by it. And we carried on working. I carried on setting up my job and did promote. I got a call from John saying, we've got a spare week. Can you take us for a week? So I put them on in Barrow in Furness, on a rugby ground, and they did one of John's spectacular shows on the Strawberry Rugby Ground in Barrow. A year later, possibly 1976, I found two people on my doorstep, John and Sue. They'd come back from Tasmania and said, we're looking for somewhere to live. What's it like here? So I said, I like it, pretty good. And they started to think, right, it must mean 77, 78 anyway. And they said, yeah, okay. I found them a house just along from me. I found them spaces to rehearse in, or to workshop space, and they moved into Ulverston. People were, oh, this is wonderful, or what on earth is happening to our town with these people? But they rapidly became interested in the town, in the work. People became very, very interested, and they became a great influence in Ulverston. And they moved around in the town to various buildings and ended up at Lanternhouse, which was the former Dole office, which is pretty good. And that became the Lanternhouse building. I mean, it's a long and complex thing. And Welfare State and I had various relationships. We, good and bad. We both wanted to do what we wanted to do, and we both were going to do it. And so we sometimes got steamrolled and sidelined and ignored, but we both carried on working until my organisation had its grants removed, a political move. I made myself redundant and left. I went to work in the shipping industry.
Okay.
Which I still work in the shipping industry 20-odd years later, 25 years later. Then things started to become interesting with Welfare State, various problems with funding, whatever, internal problems, and John eventually left. And replacement was appointed, a replacement director was appointed, and at that point the staff came to me, the then staff said, Dennis, would you be interested in coming on the board? Because we've got a problem. I went on the board and found that the 2 or 3 meetings a year came into 2 or 3 meetings a month. Such were the problems. It was interesting, it was a fight, it was a battle, and I've been used to battles all my way through my arts life, fighting for funding, fighting for existence, and we were fighting for the life of Lanternhouse. That director left, an interim director was appointed, a new director then came along, and the shit started heading towards the fan. And in a slow and easy manner, but it was heading there, and it hit, and things blew up. The chairman went, I'm off, and silly me said, looking at the people who were sitting around the table, said, well, I'll chair this one meeting, which was a very silly thing to do because I ended up as the final chair of Lanternhouse. Funding got worse and worse and worse. The relationship between the director and the Arts Council was very bad. And so many bad things were happening. It was inevitable that we had to make everybody redundant. It was a very painful move. We made everybody redundant. And then decided, what on earth shall we do? And in the end, after various meetings, various discussions, David Haley had come onto the board by that time. We decided to sell up. We fought the Arts Council for that. They said they had an interest, financial interest in the building, and they said, you can't sell it, you can't sell it, you can't sell it. The local MP came to me and said, you can't sell it, you can't sell it. What are people going to do? Well, we've got no money. We've got no money, we can't run it. The buildings need maintenance, so it needs staffing. Common sense says we cannot promote, there's no point in having an arts organisation if you cannot do any art. Full stop. So we have to free up.
Either
fund it or flog it. So they wouldn't fund it, we flogged it. What do we do with the money we're going to get? And we had various meetings, long discussions, and out of that, Futures Venture appeared. We had various meetings here in Manchester. A proposal was brought forward, various documents were produced, and at that point, when it looked as though a company was going to be formed or a new charity was going to be formed, we still hadn't sold the other building yet, it was still all pie in the sky. I said that I would not continue after the end of Lanternhouse. So we sold it. I got slagged off publicly, privately, arguments on the street, all the rest of it. It was sold and Futures Venture was born, and I walked away. And now I've come to see, I've kept my eye on it, and I've come to see what has come out of it, and it's exciting. Last night I was close to tears, finding out what had happened, all those wonderful things that happened, but they happened. They didn't not happen, they happened, and they excited people, they made changes to people's lives in an industrial town in northwest England, and other places. And I call them the bastard children of welfare state, are all over the world, influencing the arts in young people and old people, not pushing the arts as this is art, but bringing people in, encouraging them, growing it, and that's what Futures Venture is doing as well. It's bringing people in, enabling so many people. some of the work was very obscure. You couldn't understand a single word of it because John didn't use words. John painted with words. He is an artist. He painted with them. And it might be totally incomprehensible, but it had a tremendous effect on people. And I can remember some of the processions through towns which had been sort of devastated by factories closing in East Lancashire, and seeing people out there, you know, grandparents, parents, small children, babes in arms, watching a procession of very strange people making very strange music, but smiling and enjoying it. Well, from my point of view, I looked at what could involve people. I did the traditional. I did the Royal. I toured the Royal Shakespeare Company. I had the English National Ballet, English touring opera, small-scale touring theatre companies, interesting small-scale theatre companies, and then extended and extended those so they became more participatory, more involved in the people. So I can remember Northern Arts came to see. We had a tour of Scottish opera for youth into schools. One day they were in Harrington on the west coast of Cumbria, poor area where kids, but the company provided costumes, and these kids were doing opera in Harrington, an opera specially written for them, enthusiastically. This was, you know, we're talking about the 70s, and in their stripped down to a pair of greying underpants and vests, and putting on these costumes. And that was the majority of the tour into these small schools. And I'd said, Northern Arts, come and see this. But they went to St Anne's School in Windermere, where there was a very nice fee-paying school. Okay, those kids were disadvantaged. They were away from the parents. They were in an institution, really. They didn't have the parents with them. But Northern Arts saw that we feel it's inappropriate to fund something like this. Did you come yesterday? No. And I've seen people change. I mean, there was a song last night which Pete sang by Tim Fleming. His mother, Elaine, was with my first youth theatre in Ulverston. She was an apprentice hairdresser, and she came along and she thought, I can get involved in this. So from that little start with a youth theatre by my own company, she became involved in the arts and never looked back. She's still involved in the arts 30-odd, 40 years later. And her son is involved very strongly. And he will have children who will become involved. People have to think. And a lot of people can't and don't think, or they're being encouraged not to think. They must think. I had no experience of theatre whatsoever, but I'd enjoyed the Pierrots in a little sort of summer theatre in Cleveland in the 50s. I sat on the wall and watched them for free, and all these tatty little stage shows, and I'd watch them and free. And I come from Blackpool, I love tat, and I found that tat enthused me from time to time. And my first paid job in theatre was in music hall, the Players Theatre in Charing Cross. So my theatre goes from music hall to experimental theatre to now. The work of Welfare State is still being carried on by its various children worldwide, and this is yet another child that has come from the activity, the genius, the fight that John and Sue started when they started in '68, that the work that Boris was doing in Lancaster, in Planet City, in the 60s and 70s, late 60s and early 70s, and the work that say Maggie Howarth is doing, where she creates wonderful mosaic works. I have one in my front garden. It's a phoenix. It reminds me, I have regenerated myself so many times in so many different ways. I have a phoenix in the front garden.